That's settled then. We're going to win it all. But Arsenal put in a far more convincing display in their final preseason fixture. Gyökeres opened his Arsenal account. Zubimendi, quite frankly, ran the show. Saka looked sharp. And it's fair to say the mood around the Gunners is a far more positive one. We're going to break down yesterday's victory over Athletic Bilbao, discuss what we learned from it. And we are going to, discuss the bigger picture at Arsenal ahead of what is a very important campaign. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, Harry Symeou. Thanks for being here. Hey everybody, how we doing? Happy Sunday and welcome back to another episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast, an episode with a much more upbeat feel to it, and I'm pleased about that. I really am. Look, people keep saying to me, you're overreacting to what we've seen in preseason. You've gone over the top. Look, in my mind, I didn't go over the top. I never said that I wanted the manager out or that I didn't like this or I didn't like that. I talked about the clear deficiencies in the games that we saw, but we always caveated it. And we always kind of, added that pretext of, well, it is preseason. But you can't help but be concerned and worried if you are a week and a half out from a brand new campaign, a campaign in which, by the way, Arsenal have a really difficult and demanding start. You can't not be, worried about what we saw in those couple of games. But yesterday, I think, went a long way in just making people feel that little bit better about where we're at, about where we're, going into the season from. And that's what I'm really sort of pleased about. And it's not all fixed because we beat Athletic Bilbao 3-0 in a preseason friendly, but I think the mood is really important. And the mood has been significantly lifted by what was a much improved performance as a collective, but also on an individual level. And I think that for me is the bit that kind of really makes the difference. There's a few players that, look, nobody was saying that they're crap and you should get rid of them, or that we shouldn't have signed Viktor Gyökeres, or that we shouldn't have signed Martin Zubimendi. No one was saying that, but you just wanted to see a little bit more from some of the players within the group to give you that belief and to give you that confidence that we could go into the game, ready to go and go into the game at Old Trafford. I mean, ready to go and ready to kind of make a real chase for this Premier League title. Lots of back and forth in the live chat this morning. For example, our good friend, regular listener, Jid, has taken issue with my comments post some of the other preseason friendlies. And he said something like, I can't wait to see how you're going to spin this, or whatever he said. But then he said something a little bit silly. I'm sorry, mate, to call it out, but you said that you mentioned something about win the dog, like people complaining about win the dog. At no point on this podcast have I ever complained about win the dog and anything to do with that poor animal. So I don't know where that's come from. So you can't have a go at me for saying what you believe to be our inaccuracies and then throwing that kind of stuff into the equation to try and make your point seem stronger than it is. If you want to have a debate, as I've said before, we'll do it. But come on, let's have a day off of this nonsense. Arsenal have won convincingly. The mood is a lot better around the place, and yeah, let's focus our attentions and our thoughts on that game, because there was a lot to take away from it. There was a lot to unpack, which is obviously a good thing. We'll talk about some of the key moments in the game first. I think I'm going to do it a little bit differently today. I'm going to highlight some of the key moments in the game, some of the nice patterns of play that we saw, and then we'll kind of drill down into some individual performances that I'm sure have got us all feeling a lot better about where Arsenal are at. But it's funny because I want to touch on a couple of things I sort of said yesterday pre-game. So first of all, when the team news came out, I said that is much more like the side that we expect to see start at Old Trafford next Sunday. I'm not at the Arsenal today because I wasn't. I was covering a game in the Championship, but looking forward to catching up with the game later, hoping to see a few more combinations in and around the box, which we saw, and a Gyökeres goal would be nice. And Arsenal served up exactly what I was looking for. But before we sort of drill down into yesterday's game specifically, we did a podcast yesterday and it was titled How to Unlock Viktor Gyökeres. And I'd encourage you, if you haven't seen it or listened to it already, to go back and check out that episode, because I recorded that before the game against Athletic Bilbao. I recorded it bright and early on Saturday morning. We released it around about 10 a.m. on Saturday morning. And I talked loads about so many of the things that we saw put into practice in the game itself. I talked about getting the ball into the wingers nice and early and the difference that that can make in terms of creating those 1v1 situations whereby they can cause problems and they can cause damage to the opposition. I talked a lot about the midfield, and we acknowledged that the midfield that played against Villarreal was probably not the best. In fact, it was definitely not our best midfield. It's definitely not the midfield anyone expects to see start at Old Trafford. And I did question why we felt that that was the right midfield to play with Viktor Gyökeres. Like, couldn't we have done it the other way around? Couldn't we have played the first choice midfield with Viktor Gyökeres in the first half, taken them off, and then brought the others on later on? I appreciate that first and foremost, it is about fitness. Okay, it is about fitness at this stage, and it is about fine tuning things. But it's not just about fine tuning people in terms of their conditioning, it's about fine tuning some patterns, building and sort of creating those bonds and relationships between new players and their existing teammates and all the rest of it. So, yeah, I think I still believe that was the case against Villarreal, but what that game showed me or taught me is what actually needed to change and what actually needed to be tweaked. Now, I'm not saying that Mikel Arteta wasn't already aware of this. I'm not for a second suggesting that my tactical understanding of the beautiful game of football is anywhere near Mikel Arteta's, but the Villarreal game taught me something. It wasn't pretty, it was worrying, it was alarming, it was concerning because it's so close to the season and there was still, in my view and in the view of a lot of other people, so many things wrong. But it taught us, didn't it, what the blueprint needed to look like. We clearly went away and put a plan together, and we saw that plan executed against Athletic Bilbao to much better effect. So I talked about the midfield, I talked about the wingers, all of that stuff was discussed on the How to Unlock Viktor Gyökeres podcast, and we saw, look, I'm not going to blow my own trumpet, but we saw so much of that put into practice and we saw completely different results and outcomes. So go back and have a listen or have a watch of that episode to know exactly what it was that we kind of discussed and the intricacies of it, and how. And then I'm sure once you watch that or listen to that back, you'll see how it relates to what we saw against Athletic Bilbao. Now, yesterday, I didn't get to watch all of the game live, which was frustrating. I was back on the radio covering a football match for the first time officially this season. Done a couple of pre-season ones, but it was really, really good to be back behind the microphone and shouting over football games. I was at Queen's Park Rangers, who started life under a new manager, Julian Stefan, a 1-1 draw with Preston North End. But I know you're not QPR fans, but QPR looked quite good, in my opinion. There was lots of flashes of some really exciting attacking play. It was funny because when you go and cover a game as a radio reporter, you're there to cover the match itself, and then after the match you have to go and interview the managers, definitely the managers, sometimes players as well, depending on what the club are willing to give you and what they're willing to put up on the day. And so for anyone that's been to Loftus Road, right, the press box is right at the top of the stand. It's right at the top of the stand. So after the game, basically what you need to do is you need to come all the way down the stand. You need to go inside and down the staircase, and you need to get to the bottom. And then you need to walk out onto pitch side and walk along the pitch until you get to the dugouts. And you literally wait outside the tunnel for the managers to come out. Now, I can tell you that if it is pissing down with rain, that is a horrible, horrible experience standing there waiting. But it was beautiful yesterday. The sun was shining. And so what did I do? I didn't leave my laptop upstairs at the desk. I brought my laptop down with me. I sat in the manager's dugout at Loftus Road, and I logged into Arsenal.com and I watched the first half of the game. That's how long it took for me to get my interview, around about 45 minutes. And then I caught some of the second half as I was on the train back, but my signal was a little bit iffy. So then I watched the rerun of the game on Arsenal.com, kicked off at 8 o'clock on the rerun. So I watched the whole rerun back, and I was really, really pleased with what I saw. And obviously watching it on your laptop in the sunshine while you kind of got one eye on something else isn't ideal. Didn't feel that I could really analyze it off that basis. So Needed the rewatch, and I have to say, I thoroughly enjoyed the rewatch. Let's talk about some of the kind of tactical aspects then, and some of the key moments from yesterday's game, and what they kind of told us. Now, I mentioned to you that we talked loads about the fullbacks, the wingers, I beg your pardon, and the need for them to beat people, the need for them to get to the byline, and then the fact that you've got an out-and-out centre forward in Viktor Gyökeres, who is going to stand his ground and stay in that really kind of dangerous area, is going to mean that once that winger beats the fullback, the central defensive cover isn't going to come straight away. And that just creates room and that just creates space. This was a prime example of that in the first half, where Bukayo Saka sort of skipped past a couple of challenges. This was 6 minutes into the game. For those of you watching, you'll see the screenshot. He skipped past one, he skipped past two, he's left them both for dead. He's got to the byline and he starts to work his way across the byline towards the goal. Look at where Viktor Gyökeres is. Dead central on the edge of the 6-yard box, occupying centre halves. And credit to Gabriel Martinelli here as well, because he's also made the run infield from that left-hand side, which gives the centre-backs something else to worry about and someone else to consider in that situation. But just look at the space between Bukayo Saka and the goal. And that comes from having players in those areas and getting players into those areas as quickly as possible. But Saka's got to do his bit, and his bit is to beat the man, to get to the byline, and to cause that level of chaos. And he's done exactly that. So that was a good example put into practice of what I was talking about on that sort of Viktor Gyökeres special podcast that we did. So I just wanted to highlight that. This was another moment that we generated in the first half. This was around about 10 minutes in, where again, with direct passing, with quick movement of the ball, without taking those extra touches. And that's something that Martin Zubimendi brings to us in an abundance, the ability to move the ball quickly without dwelling on it, without taking too long. And the fact that he can do things first time so often, it does make the difference, because look, we generate a 1v1. And now when you put Martinelli in this type of position, that's when you're going to see him go. That's when you're going to see him be effective. Now, in the end, I think he sort of went on the outside of the player and he dragged the shot wide of the near post. But give him those 1v1s and he will cause teams problems. Don't give him those 1v1s. Leave him in situations where he's trying to break down low blocks and you don't get anywhere near the best iteration of Gabriel Martinelli. So I thought that was, again, another example of us working the ball into our wingers early and giving them the opportunity to take on their players 1v1. Now, of course, Viktor Gyökeres got off the mark yesterday, but generally speaking, I thought he was far more involved in the game. He was very unlucky not to score a second goal. I mean, who said he can't header, by the way? What a load of old nonsense that is. Okay, maybe he didn't score any for Sporting Lisbon, but he certainly can do it. We saw it yesterday. We saw his brilliant goal that opened the scoring, and he went desperately close in the second half as well when he hit the post from a Noni Madueke cross. But this is just a kind of screenshot of the goal. And it was, again, Bukayo Saka going down that right-hand side, being super aggressive, and then rolling the ball back to the corner of the box where Zubimendi arrives. Now, Martin Zubimendi has been sort of labelled as this kind of very safe and sturdy, but not very adventurous number 6. That was the preconception I had of Martin Zubimendi in my mind. We're going to talk about him on an individual basis a little bit later on in the pod, and we'll really drill down into his performance. But he is so willing, isn't he? And we touched on this in other games, to go right, to go left. We've kind of seen this theme in pre-season. I mean, first of all, the quality of the delivery into Viktor Gyökeres is just sensational. But Gyökeres' movement, he's probably 3 or 4 players further into the crowd as Zubimendi approaches this ball. He senses that the cross is coming. He shows that real brilliant goal-scoring instinct. He makes a dart across the front of the defenders who could do nothing to stop him, because he's powerful and he's very physical. And he just, glances the ball on perfectly into the far post. He helps it on. He doesn't need to make too hard a contact with it. He uses the pace on it and he sticks it in the far corner. It's a brilliant goal. And from that moment, you thought, wow, a combination of our 2 new signings, it's kind of what you want and what you hope for, isn't it? When you turn up to a game like yesterday's, can they do it? Can they combine? And that's exactly what we got from them. Brilliant stuff. Moving on to a little bit later on in the game, this was another situation. In fact, this was the build-up to Bukayo Saka's goal. And we talked about how Viktor Gyökeres would give us something very different to Kai Havertz, in that Kai Havertz quite likes to drop into those pockets and create the room in behind him for other people to run into. And we sort of said that it's more likely that Viktor Gyökeres spins off the shoulder of the defender and wants to run in behind. And I think that's absolutely right. But on this occasion, he showed that he's got more strings to his bow because he drops deeper here and he creates that room in behind him because he drags the centre half out. Look at the centre half. He's glued to Viktor Gyökeres. He's already watched Viktor Gyökeres ghost across him and power in a header. And now he's panicked and he's worried and he's concerned about Gyökeres' physicality. So he steps out and he goes to confront him. Gyökeres, again, combines brilliantly with Zubimendi here. I can't show you the clips for copyright reasons, obviously. But Gyökeres just cushions it into the path of Zubimendi, who again plays a first-time pass. Arsenal are in behind. Martinelli combines with Saka, and Saka rolls it into the back of the net. So variety is what we're after here. Okay, we talked about what we expect Gyökeres to do 6 out of 10 times in terms of spinning and running in behind. But he displayed in that instance that he can also come short. He can link up. He can combine. I thought his combination and link-up play on the day was generally much better than anything we'd seen in his previous appearances. And then the final bit I want to highlight is obviously the goal that Kai Havertz scored. The ball comes to Bukayo Saka. The awareness is brilliant, but you're almost at times kind of playing a bit of a percentage game here because Arsenal have been very, very aggressive on the day, and clearly there's been conversations and discussions behind the scenes about runners in behind. And I'm not saying that you should take anything away from this assist from Bukayo Saka because it is truly brilliant. But, you know, he knows that someone is going to be making that run. He knows that someone is going to be on their bike. So what does he do? He hooks it into the space. And look at where Kai Havertz is starting here, by the way. There are 1, 2, 3, 4 defenders at least. One of them's gone to squeeze Saka, but there are definitely 3 that are far closer to the ball and to the space that he's attacking than he is. But he's got that momentum. And once he gets going and once he gets running and he uses that power, you can't stop him. You know, even when he makes it into the box and he ends up being about 12, 11 yards out before he takes on the shot, yeah, he's off balance, but you can't knock him off it. You know, Kai Havertz has bulked up, he's powered up, and it was a brilliant run and a brilliant finish to put the icing on top of the cake. Just a really, really good team goal again, and it speaks to the directness that we saw Arsenal play with yesterday, which was, of course, very, very encouraging. Right, we're going to take a short pause, really, really short pause, and when we come back, we'll drill into some of the individual performances. We'll talk about how this leaves us feeling going into next weekend's Premier League opener. And we'll take a load of your questions and thoughts from the live chat as well. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, Harry Symeou.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe.
That's right. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Like and subscribe. Okay. Yeah, did I say like? I said like and subscribe, didn't I? Let me put that little graphic on the screen to just remind you guys. There you go. There it is. Look at that. We're getting all high tech here. On the Chronicles of a Gooner, like, subscribe, turn the bell on so that you get notifications. If you are listening to us on Apple or Spotify, please do leave us a review. It really, really does help. And if you want to go one further and become a Chronicles of a Gooner patron, you can do so via the link in the description. Patreon.com/Chronicles of a Gooner. You get access to exclusive content as well as ad-free episodes, which I know is a big deal to a lot of people. Right. I've touched on Gyökeres' performance. I thought it was really, really interesting what Mikel Arteta had to say after the game, in that, you know, he will destroy you if you give him the opportunity to do so. You know, he was very physical, very powerful, very direct, very switched on. And it feels like he's learning quickly, which is probably the most encouraging thing, I would argue, from an Arsenal supporter's perspective, because we saw him come on very, very briefly against Tottenham out in Hong Kong, right? You couldn't have really expected too much from him on that occasion. He clearly wasn't up to speed. We talked about it post-match. Then he played against Villarreal for probably 60, 65 minutes. And again, I had very similar things to say in that he didn't look like he was ready. He looked like someone who had been put into the starting 11 because Kai Havertz wasn't available. I really did feel that that was the case. But it was good for him because it built up his minutes and he started to have to figure out problems on the pitch. And that was evident, I thought, in the first half, where about 20, 25 minutes in, he kind of looked at the situation and went, I'm not getting on the ball enough here. I'm not involved enough here. So I'm going to slightly adapt my game and adjust my game. And what he did was start drifting into those kind of half spaces, mainly on the left, but a little bit on the right as well, if the opportunity presented itself. And he started to get a little bit more involved, but then he ran out of gas in the second half because, again, his fitness level wasn't where it needed to be. Yesterday, he looked fitter and sharper, still some way to go, and he's got another week to really kind of power himself up in that sense. But when you've got Kai Havertz back as well, and the two of them can share that role, then obviously that takes some of the pressure away because one can be the starter, one can be the finisher, right? We're absolutely fine with that. We've got two very, very good options there. And I think actually Kai Havertz's goal yesterday was a timely reminder of that, in all the Gyökeres talk, and yes, there's a lot of excitement and people are bullish about the signing, as they should be. We've still got another very, very good forward player that we can use. We haven't even got Gabby Jesus back yet, who again is very different to these two, but has his uses and has his skill sets as well. So really, really pleased with what we saw from Gyökeres, the combinations, the sort of development of his understanding of what's going on around him is really, really positive. And he's someone who absolutely loves to score goals. People kept saying, didn't they, that he couldn't score headers. I mean, the header he scored was pretty special. And the one that he hit the post with was desperately unlucky, really, because it's such a brilliant sort of leap and power towards the ball. And he's just an inch or so away from getting it right. And all of a sudden, us talking about being set piece FC with this absolute powerhouse of a ball header in our team. So, yeah, we'll see. Look, we'll get into some of your questions and comments a little bit later on. So keep them coming. In fact, pause putting them in the chat because they might get lost in there. Hold fire on them and I'll come to you in a bit just to pick those up. I also have to talk about Martin Zubimendi's display. The guy just oozes class. I mean, when we first signed him, I said that I wasn't as excited as a lot of other people. And that didn't go down well with everybody. You know, a lot of friends of mine, colleagues of mine said to me, you wait and see. You watch this lad play in red and white, and within a few weeks, your opinion will completely change. And it was never that I thought he was a bad player. What I said, and sort of this is kind of word for word, is that I don't have any concerns about what he can do with the ball at his feet on a technical level, but I wondered how he'd fare physically in our midfield. And I said repeatedly that the only way that you're going to get the maximum out of Zubimendi, so you can allow Zubimendi to show off what he's capable of from a technical standpoint, is if you adjust the balance of our midfield, you slightly tweak and adjust Declan Rice's role, and then you end up with them both playing a type of game that complements that of the other player. And as a combination, they become formidable. It's not about any one of them as an individual. Okay. It's about sort of getting the best out of both. And I really feel like we stumbled. I don't want to say stumbled across something yesterday, because that would suggest that it wasn't pre-planned or pre-thought of, which I don't think would be giving the boss enough credit. But we certainly saw a glimpse of something really special in terms of that partnership developing. You saw them taking it in turns to go and get the ball off the defense. You saw them being very mindful of where one another were positioned and stationed at any given moment. If Zubi went, Rice would hold. And if Rice went, then Zubi would have that awareness and go and drop into the right spaces as well. His reading of the game is incredible. He's fantastic at sort of sensing where the ball's going to drop, where the ball's going to land. And he uses his sort of in-game intelligence to give him that little bit of an advantage and head start, even if he's not the quickest across the pitch. But if you can anticipate before everybody else and you can position yourself before everybody else, stand a great chance, don't you, of dealing with the situation. He's got a wonderful touch. He's brilliant at moving the ball through the lines first time, which contributes to that more direct approach that we've been talking about and contributes to our ability to work the ball into the wingers and into the forwards earlier. He's just a really effing good player. And when you think about what we've paid for this guy, my God, it's an absolute steal, isn't it? It really, really is. I mean, I think we, over the course of the season, I know we're all focused on Gyökeres and we're all looking for the goals. And there is that kind of glamorous sort of feeling around goal scorers because they're the difference makers in a lot of ways. But I'm willing to make a bet now, and I'm willing to say that I was wrong on Zubimendi, that by the end of the season, we're looking at him and we're going, that was the most important signing that we made over the course of this summer. I really, really do believe that. He's just unbelievable. Fantastic talent, fantastic player. Talked about his ability to move the ball forward early. He's got a bit more of a bite as well. And we kind of established that when we did our scouting video on him, which you can find, by the way, on our Patreon page. Got a bit more bite than I thought. A little bit more of a mover than I thought. Definitely not stuck to that sixth position in the way that I thought he might be. And I think, as I say, I've been saying for a while, those of you that listen regularly will know that I've said, if we can just tweak the midfield slightly, we could really get the best out of this guy, but also get the best out of Declan Rice again as well. Because I feel at times we look at Rice and we go, yeah, use him as an 8 because he's scoring goals and he's powering his way through and he's been really, really impactful. And there are other games where we face low blocks and you're looking at Rice and you're going, I don't know if I want you to be that high up the pitch all the time, or if I want you to be that high up in terms of your starting position, or if I'd prefer for you to just be a little bit deeper and arrive later on. So yeah, wonderful player, wonderful performance, and can't wait to see more of him. He's just, he's shown me what he's all about, and why there was a real desire on Arsenal's part to go and get that deal agreed and in place best part of a year in advance. Right, let's move on. Just talking about that Zubimendi / Rice pivot, the balance that gave us as a team. It also platforms Martin Odegaard as well, doesn't it? It allows him to get forward without really worrying too much about what he's leaving behind him. It allows him to get closer to the centre forward, which I think is imperative if we're going to, really get the best out of Viktor Gyökeres. It allows him to get closer to Bukayo Saka as well without worrying too much about what happens in the turnover. And he's back to his best in the sense of, and listen, he's got a long way to go before we're talking about it being peak Martin Odegaard again. I accept that and acknowledge that. But he's at his best, Odegaard, right? For me, when he's talking and when he's organising. We know he's got fantastic technical ability. If I could pick one player in the Arsenal team, well, maybe it would be Zubimendi now. But if I could pick one player to play that kind of final ball in behind, it could be Martin Odegaard. So I want him in those areas to be able to do that. I want him to be able to get close to the box and take shots on that goal. And just having that little bit more stability, that double pivot of Rice and Zubimendi is going to give you, I just think that's really important to getting the best out of Martin Odegaard again. So, yeah, balance is really everything, isn't it, when you're talking about midfields especially. I thought Bukayo Saka looked a million times sharper than he did in midweek. And his assist for the Havertz goal, which I've already touched on, was sensational. Talked about him beating his man, getting to the byline, causing all sorts of chaos. Took his goal really well as well. And yeah, you feel a lot better about where Bukayo Saka's at going into the new season now. We touched on Havertz, goal, power, running, fantastic finish. And I've got a feeling that the competition and us kind of moving away from an over-reliance on the German is going to see him just relax a little bit and therefore produce his best stuff. Kai Havertz might not start every game this season. And I know for a lot of people, they're fine with that. There's a lot of people that don't want him in the starting 11, felt that was where we were missing something. I always felt that the kind of analysis of Kai Havertz in particular and suggestions that he was the problem were a little bit unfair, because I think he did an admirable job at a time where we clearly didn't have a natural 9 within our ranks. Now we've gone out and got that now. But what I hope is that will allow people now to see the impact that Kai Havertz can have when he's not seen as the main goal threat. Because that's never what Kai Havertz has been at any point in his career. He's always been a kind of second striker, someone that likes to join in from slightly deeper. And I feel like we can use him for that more now. And I feel like we can use him late on in games, when games are stretched, by bringing him on when Gyökeres has run himself into the ground to stretch people, to use his physicality. And I think in that instance, you're gonna be able to extract the best version of Kai Havertz, because there isn't going to be that same pressure. You know, Kai Havertz, the impact player, could be huge for us this season. He really could. And I hope that, you know, this slightly different role for him, which I believe is going to see him thrive, is going to start to change people's opinions on him, because I think he's a really misunderstood player in a lot of ways. Noni Madueke playing from the left. Thoughts on that? I really like it. I really, really like it. I think he's really direct. He seemed to work incredibly hard defensively as well. And I think to get the best out of Noni Madueke on the left, you have to platform him. And I think the best way to platform him is by playing Jurrien Timber at left back. That might be a controversial opinion. But I think we've got different types of players, right, available to us on that left-hand side. So if you're playing Martinelli, who is going to work defensively harder than any other wing option that we have in our team, I think that's indisputable. Then having a fullback that's going to get up and support him is probably going to benefit him, because he can do the work going backwards, which means that fullback is not solely relied upon for that side of things. But also, I feel like Martinelli needs a second player to work with on that left-hand side to really be at his best. Noni Madueke feels a bit more individual to me, in that if you gave him a 1v1 or even a sort of Madueke up against two defenders kind of scenario, I think he's more likely to be successful in a 2v1 against him than Martinelli is, because I think he's a better dribbler. Okay. And he's got a bit more trickery, and he's got a bit more in the locker in that sense. And therefore, you don't need to push the left back on. So what you'd rather kind of do in that scenario is let Madueke have the freedom of the left flank. But then you need a fullback that is going to be really defensively sound, because that fullback is probably going to face situations where it's then 2-on-1 against them. Jurrien Timber is the best 1v1 or 2v1 defender, in my opinion, that we have at Arsenal Football Club. And I think that our best back four, and I know a lot of people disagree with this, a lot of people really enjoyed Ricardo Calafiori's performance yesterday. I kind of gauged that from some of the reaction I got to a Twitter post that I put out last night. But my best defense, like if we were going away to Anfield and we needed to keep him out, and you said to me, what's the best back four that Arsenal have at their disposal? As much as I love Miles Lewis-Skelly, he wouldn't be in it. Just from a defensive standpoint, it would be White at right back, Saliba, Gabriel, and Timber at left back. That for me is the best that we have available to us. There's discipline there, there's physicality there, there's technical ability there. It's got it all. If you play a Timber at left back who's not going to roam into midfield anywhere near as much as Lewis-Skelly does, who's not going to go flying up the left-hand side like Ricardo Calafiori does, then Madueke on the left makes sense. It makes sense because on an individual level, he's capable of making things happen. I think that's less true with someone like Martinelli, who probably needs a little bit more support. So again, when I was talking about the midfield and I was talking about balance and how important that is, it's really important that we get the right balance on our left-hand side as well to make it functional. And I know Madueke had some bright moments, taking people on, getting to the byline, putting crosses in with his left foot. And here we're talking about a left-footed winger playing on the left, which is something different to what we've seen at Arsenal for quite some time. You saw the kind of effectiveness of having that left footer on a couple of occasions in that second half. There was one that he flashed it across the goal, brilliant delivery. And then there was the cross for the Viktor Gyökeres header that came off the foot of the post. And the key to that was not that it was this outrageously good delivery into the box. The key to that was that as soon as the ball broke to Madueke, he looked up, let it roll across his body onto his stronger foot, and played the cross instantly. Now, if that was Martinelli, and this is not to slate Martinelli, but he's a right-footed player. If that was any right-footed player in that scenario, they've probably got to take a touch to set themselves, and then they deliver the cross. But in taking that touch, the space for the centre forward closes. The central defender is able to get across and plug the hole and deal with the space. In this instance, you put the ball in early, bang, Gyökeres is there, and he's very, very unlucky not to score. But it's the kind of direct and earliness, essentially, of that cross that makes the difference. So I really, really like Noni Madueke on that left-hand side. And I've said for a few weeks now that I'm coming round to the idea of him being at Arsenal a little bit more, and I'm starting to understand the reasons behind that transfer a little bit more. Have I been at times maybe over emotional during the summer window? Yes. And I've said that many, many times, and I've held my hands up and I've said it's because I am desperate to see us get over the line. I am. I don't make any apologies for wanting to see my team succeed. Some people have accused me of joining the kind of negative club. I don't think I have, but if people feel that I have, then fine. You're entitled to your opinion, and I'm more than happy to be challenged on that. But I feel like my desperation to see Arsenal succeed is just taken over. And I feel a hell of a lot better having watched Arsenal perform at a much higher level in yesterday's game. And I know it's still a preseason game, and I know it's not the be-all and end-all. It's the same pretext that I applied when analysing all of the other preseason games. But I certainly feel a hell of a lot better going up to Old Trafford next weekend now than I would have done if you'd asked me on Thursday morning after a really drab and dull display against Villarreal. So, yeah, that's where I'm at. I guess, you could argue that, we were kind of building up to a point where physically we were hoping to peak around now rather than 2-3 weeks ago. But we've always acknowledged the fitness issues, and we've always acknowledged that, players are not quite at that level. For me, it was the lack of patterns, and it was the lack of clear, footballing philosophy that really annoyed me. But it feels like with the right pieces in the right places and with improved fitness levels, that in a lot of ways takes care of itself. This is a new version of Arsenal. This is a new iteration of Mikel Arteta's Arsenal. And it's a bit like when Pep Guardiola got Erling Haaland in. Do you remember that? And people were going, hold on a minute, this guy's been playing with a false nine. I'm not saying that Gyökeres is going to score the same volume of goals as Erling Haaland. But if you remember at the time, the big talking point in discussion was Man City haven't played with an out-and-out number 9 before. It's always been a false 9. So how do they now make that adaptation and change? And the best coaches find a way. And we've got to trust that Mikel is going to be able to do that. And hopefully that's the case. What else did I want to touch on very, very quickly? I do want to get your questions and thoughts from the live chat. So start getting them in to the chat box now. I'd really, really appreciate that. Where are we at in terms of likes on the board at the moment? Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. I believe that we're about 225 odd subscribers away from hitting that 45,000 milestone on the YouTube channel that we wanted to reach by the start of the season. So we've got about a week or so to do it. If you are watching this video, if you are enjoying the channel, make sure that you are subscribed. It doesn't cost a thing. Very, very easy. Click with one button, but it really, really helps me. Also, make sure you leave a like on the YouTube video, not in the live chat box, on the YouTube video itself. That's massive. Check us out on Patreon as well if you'd like. And yeah, thank you all so much for your support. The final thing I wanted to touch on before I dive into your comments, so get them in the chat box now, was Mikel Arteta's post-match comments with regards to kind of the transfer market. Now, despite all the positive things that we talked about today, and the fact that I'm feeling much, much better about the upcoming season now than I was a few days ago, which some people will claim is knee-jerk, but that's just the way I feel. Can't help it. Mikel Arteta didn't rule out any more signings. He sort of hinted strongly at outgoings, but also didn't rule out the idea of Arsenal bringing in more people. He said that, we were actively monitoring the market and monitoring opportunities, etc., etc. And that's good to hear. That doesn't mean that we're definitely going to go and do it, but to know that Arsenal are still active and Arsenal are still considering certain options, that gives me comfort to a degree and to a point. I still think we're one short. I still think we're one attacker short, because we're inevitably going to suffer injuries. We're inevitably going to go through periods where certain players' form drops. And I still think that from an attacking perspective, we could do with one more player. I wanted that for a long time to be Eberechi Eze. I still do. But it feels like that deal is not quite as likely as maybe I and many others thought it was maybe 2-3 weeks ago, which is a little bit frustrating. But, we'll have to wait and see. Like, I just wanted to know that we're still active, I think is what I needed on a personal level. So yeah, let's see. Let's see what's going to transpire in what remains of the window. Are there going to be any market opportunities? Some people have labeled us as Market Opportunity FC. Right, let's get into the live chat box. Let's get some of your questions now, shall we? Big shout out to Jason Rogers, who says, good morning from America, finally up early enough to watch this live. Good stuff, mate. Thank you for being with us. Really, really do appreciate the love and support. I know we've got so many listeners over in the States, which is incredible. I was looking at some of the stats yesterday on the audio side of things in particular, and it's incredible to me how many listeners we've got from right around the world. Stephen says, did you notice how much more quickly Raya moved the ball forward yesterday? It seems that Gyökeres' presence is increasing our urgency in attack. Yeah, there's clearly an emphasis on getting the ball to him nice and early and getting the ball into that forward line as quickly as we possibly can. And David Raya plays a massive part in that. There was a time at the end of last season when we were lacking creativity, and I felt that maybe there was a bit of an over-reliance on David Raya in terms of expecting him to progress the ball through the lines and all the rest of it. But it's one hell of a weapon to have, isn't it? To know that you've got a goalkeeper that's capable of picking someone out brilliantly. To know that there's centre-backs that can do it. We've got full-backs that can do it. We've got midfielders that can do it. It just shows you that we've got technical quality all the way through the team. And so there's got to be a big emphasis. That's kind of got to be the big message, I think, going into this season. Our structures are good, generally speaking. Defensively, we're a good side. I know we've shown lapses in pre-season, but we all know, because we've seen it over the last 3 years, that defensively, we're a very good side. The big message has got to be work it into attack quickly, sharply. Do that, and we will create the opportunities that we need. And hopefully we have the centre forward in place now, who is going to really kind of take advantage of that and put us in a really strong position. AFC just responding to my comments about Arteta talking transfers. He didn't rule out a striker in January either. Well, no, he didn't rule it out. And I just said that I don't think that definitely means we're going to get someone, but you've got to be at least considering it. You've got to be looking. And also, for what it's worth, it wasn't Mikel Arteta that didn't want a striker in January, by the way. It wasn't the case. That wasn't the case. Joachim says, can Dalman play in the Premier League this year before turning 16? I did look this up yesterday. And yes, he can. As an under-16s player, he's now permitted to play in the Premier League and Cup competitions, but he will have to wait until he's 16 to play in the Champions League. The UEFA rules are different. But didn't Ethan Nwaneri make his debut at 15? I'm pretty sure he did. So that's not a problem based on a very quick sort of bit of research that I did yesterday. D1997 says, do you think Rice and Zubimendi and Odegaard is too safe for playing against the real low blocks? I still think that it is. No, I don't, because I think that Zubimendi has shown me, and Rice has shown us over the course of the last 2 seasons, that they don't need to play as a very sort of strict double pivot. Both of them are quite capable of going higher up, and both of them are quite capable of sort of working around the opposition's penalty area. So I think you'll have to adjust the way that you deploy them in certain games and in certain situations. But I certainly think they've got the capacity and the capability to do that role and further up the pitch. Bill McClintock says, won't the acquisition of Eze cover the need for quality midfield throughout the season? Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I want us to sign him. Yeah, I really do. Andy says, can you make pairing teams that you think work in a video? For example, Nelly and Gyökeres and Saka works. Nelly, Gyökeres doesn't. Same as you did with Nelly, Timber teams for maximum effectiveness. Yeah, combinations is what you're sort of getting at there. Let me just make a note of that. Because I'm always looking for podcast ideas. So yeah, video / podcast analyzing Arsenal's attacking combinations. There you go. We'll do something like that. Yeah, we'll do it. That's a good idea. Thank you. DJ Khalid says, good morning, listening to the podcast at the gym. Love from the Netherlands. Love to you as well, mate. Thank you for tuning in. I'm going to pick one or two more before I disappear. Here we go. Steve says the Evening Standard are saying Arsenal are closing in on the Neze deal with one remaining element of the deal to be finalized. Do you have any info on this? I don't. The last I heard was that it's not ruled out. It's not impossible. He's a player that Arsenal very much like. He wants Arsenal, but at the time, and this was on, because I think I talked about it on Thursday's episode. This was on Wednesday. At the time, there was no real progress to the point where people within the club or around the club were happy with us to run with the kind of, it's just a matter of timeline. Like, I know that you'll always be cautious as a football club in a situation and in a scenario like that, but this is not, well, as far as I heard on Wednesday, things might have changed. But as far as I was aware at that point, this was not imminent. This was not as close as some people had been reporting. But that might have changed. I hope it changes because I'd really like to see him join up with Arsenal. I really, really would. Eze versus Liverpool this afternoon should be very, very interesting. Yeah, Community Shield today, which should be an interesting game. We get a good look at Liverpool. I know it's still technically in the eyes of some people. I know Mikel counts it as a trophy. I'm not sure I agree with that, but it is a curtain raiser to the season. Played at Wembley, there is something at stake. So I'm going to be interested to sit and have a look at Liverpool. So much so that I had I've got some dinner plans with some friends later on, and they'd originally booked it for like quite early, which was my fault because I totally forgot the Community Shield was happening 2 weeks ago when we discussed it. I've had to ask them to just push the restaurant booking an hour back so that I can watch the Community Shield first, because I'm really interested and intrigued to see how that's going to go. Also, as well, just a quick thing before I leave you guys. I did a poll during one of the watch-alongs that we did in pre-season where I asked people whether they'd be interested in watch-alongs that are not Arsenal related on the channel, just games that have some impact on us, whether it's rivals playing or whatever, because I'm thinking about, and if you guys are interested in this, I'd love to do it. I'm thinking about doing a watch along, maybe if everything works out, if my daughter isn't born in that short period of time between now and then, of Liverpool's opening game in the Premier League. Friday night live type of thing. We can sit down, we can watch the game in each other's company. We'll bring you a loose commentary as we have done throughout pre-season with some of those watch-alongs. You can sync us up with your stream or your clock on whatever you're watching it, and Serie A games maybe as well, as Rumble sort of suggested in the chat there as well. Would you be interested in that for the opening night of the Premier League season? If you are, and I can make it work, I don't want to make any promises because, as I say, my wife's about to pop. But if you guys are willing and are interested, leave a thumbs up in the live chat so I know. And if enough of you are interested, then I wouldn't mind doing that. I think it'd be good fun. And also as well, right, the thing about me this season, and the thing about sort of the watch-alongs, which have got an insane response over the summer, which is what's making me think about doing more of them, is that soon I'm going to have 3 kids in the house. Now, 2 is chaos enough. Love them to bits. Wouldn't change it for the world. But I do sometimes find it hard to sit down and concentrate on a game of football in my living room because they're just up and down, crazy, playing really loudly. Dad, 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 every 2 minutes. So actually doing watch-alongs is kind of a nice way of me sort of saying, got to go down into my office, stick the game on my screen here, and watch the game in a bit of peace. So yeah, that's even more motive to do them, I suppose. Witty says, will you share your screen to us? I can't. I'll get done for copyright. I'm not an official broadcaster of any league or anything like that. So I can't share the game with you. No watch-alongs share the game with you. We'll bring you a sort of loose commentary. We'll have a clock, and we'll have the score and stuff on display, so you can sync up as best as possible. But yeah, look, let me be clear. I absolutely love my children, but sometimes you just want to sit and watch a game in peace. And I can sit and I can open a nice cold beer, and we can sit and enjoy the game in each other's company. While hopefully growing the channel as well. And then, hopefully we'll attract listeners from different parts of the world and from different clubs as well. If we're obviously, covering all sorts of different things. But yeah, why not? Anyway, thank you all so much. Really, really do appreciate the love and support as always. Don't forget to leave a like on the video before you go. If you haven't done so already, don't forget to subscribe to the channel as well. Leave us your thoughts in the comments section below. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, leave us a review. And if you fancy it, join us on Patreon. I'll see you all very, very soon. Until the next one, take care of yourselves and have a wonderful Sunday. Arsenal are back, and we're winning it all. Up the Gunners. Goodbye.